In this video, I'm going to transform my crafting space by creating medieval-themed practical buildings that act as containers for all my crafting and hobbying materials. This video is sponsored by Bamboo Lab, who have sent me the H2D Laser Edition. Now, laser cutters are really useful for making containers that you can store all your things in. But I want to combine my two passions of miniature hobbying and the stuff I make at these workstations with the use case of laser cut storage, mushing them together to make a medieval city that doubles as my storage. So to get started, I switch my H2D into its laser mode, which is absurdly simple. You just slide in the laser module, click it into place and insert its two connections, and then just swap over the 3D printing base for the laser cut tray. Then you just let it run its calibration as you turn it on and you're good to go. To make it easy on myself, I'm going to start off with a few pre-made projects. A mixture of some castle towers and multi-story buildings that are ready for laser cutters that I can bring into the Bamboo suite and set about seeing if I can tweak these to fit the storage use that I have in mind. It took me a few cuts to realize that I can actually exit out of the cutting view and still work on files on new projects. So that definitely sped up my productivity as I could actually prepare the next cuts while the laser cutter was doing its thing. And now with all my pieces laid out in front of me comes the fun part. Gluing all this together is really straightforward and incredibly satisfying. I really cannot understate how soul-hugging this feels. Seeing all of these exactly, accurately cut pieces neatly slotting in together is just so fun. Now, Bamboo actually make a huge variety of materials that you get off their website. So I'm actually working with 3 different kinds of wood. A really light birch ply, then all of the woodwork is done in a black walnut, and the roof in sepal. It's like a more terracotta style wood. Then with the roof on, the finishing touches are the windows, which I actually glue paper backing on the insides so that they're all black and you can't see through them. And then I glued my laser cut window inserts on top, which again, just so satisfying. This is what it looks like without any paint, any weathering, anything. It looks freaking stunning. I am just, it's so good. And I have a removable lid. So this is where the storage plan will come into play. By carefully measuring the space on the inside, and as you can see, I'd cut holes out where the laser floors were on the inside, I can create a container that will go in and all the way to the bottom. This is really useful website. If you get a laser cutter, I highly recommend checking it out. It's called makercase.com. You type in your box measurements and whether you've measured from the inside or the outside, which is super useful. Pick your 3mm thickness and simply export these files. That goes straight into the Bamboo suite, ready to cut. And just like that, I have container to fit inside. Look at that. Oh my God! And the lid goes back on. So the idea is you put your brushes in there and that can neatly go away and stay on display without looking like a messy desk. Oh, I accidentally put the windows at the back instead of the front, so it looks a bit blank here, but I feel like we can do a little decoration there. We'll get to that later. Next, I want to do another one, but get a little more complicated. I found this really cool 2-story building with a little tower at the back, which I could picture having multiple little compartments. But this is going to take a little bit more planning and finessing to make it what I envision because it's not the original purpose of this design. But that's pretty easy in the software. You can actually just double click on any of the shapes and break it all apart, move things around by node. There's Boolean options, so you can sort of merge or subtract geometry. So with a bit of forward thinking, I separated 3 little areas that I could later use to pull out with drawers that I will make to fit on the inside. I'm just going to quickly add, because I know there will be people who say something in the comments about ventilation. Don't worry, I've got this machine which you can actually get with the H2D, which has been running non-stop. All right, so this is what it's sort of meant to look halfway through the build process, but I have kept this piece here separatable so I can turn that into a drawer that can be pulled out. And same here with this little flap that won't stay in there because I don't want to glue it in yet. I'm gonna have a drawer that sits in there that comes out with this. And I've also separated the tower top, my thought being that I could have a long container. I don't know how many things I'll fit in them. They're quite small drawers. I guess this is, you know, more of an experimentation to see how many drawers I can fit in the one thing. Among the various materials that Bambu Labs sells on their website, you can get opaque colored acrylics. As you can see, especially after being cut, this glossy black acrylic looks super schmick and is gonna make my whole little drawer system look really professional. Now that I have the drawers that I'm happy with, it's time to move on to all of the decorations around my house, including the wood frames and the stones. And I'm gonna do something a little bit different because the stones are the same sort of yellowy birch material as the outside of the building. Here's a little color theory magic for you. The opposite to yellow on the color wheel is purple, which means that if I create a really light wash of a purple, I can put that over my yellowy stones and it will neutralize it and just make it look desaturated, which is what I want. I want them to feel more like stones and less like the birch. Just enjoy this moment of bringing it all together. Oh my God, this is so nice. Now that I've done two houses, I want to up the scale a bit and do a castle wall. Now, I don't picture using the castle wall for much other than just to act as a backdrop to really make me feel immersed in this world. But I did cut holes in the very top of the platforms of the towers so that I can at the very least use them as brush holders. Putting these together was a little more fiddly than the others, but just as satisfying. And once all glued together, they work really nicely. This is a very cool system. How good is this? I got my towers that I can put my long brushes and my ruler in. I've got my in, which I can keep my brushes and tools in. And I've got whatever you would call this one, which happens to have 3 different compartments, including an extra tall one. It's so fun. I'm just getting started. I'm gonna switch over to the 3D printer now to add some variety to my workstation. And doing that is an absolute breeze. You literally just unplug and remove the laser cutter, pull out that laser cut tray insert, and after doing a lot of heavy laser cutting for a full day, there is a slight build-up of carbon which you can simply wipe away. Then it's just a matter of putting back in the original build plate and you're ready to 3D print again. This video is sponsored by Bambu Lab, the industry leader in 3D printing, now adding laser cutting into the mix. The H2D is the all-in-one DIY powerhouse. I really can't even emphasize how easy and straightforward Bambu Lab have made 3D printing, and they have done exactly the same with laser cutting. I mean, you've probably seen us use these printers in loads of projects that are not sponsored by Bambu because we use Bambu's 3D printers all the time. It makes insane and stupid and fun projects just doable and easy. If I had to choose one piece of our cool creative technology in this building to keep, it's the H2D. It just lets you do so much with so much ease and such high quality. So massive thank you to Bambu Lab for sponsoring this video. Go check out the H2D and their other incredible range of 3D printers. The links are of course all in the description. Go check it out, and without further ado, let's do some 3D printing. I actually need to find some stuff to print, so I should get on that. There is so much on MakerWorld, and there's an entire laser cutting section that wasn't there last time I went to the website. I mean, honestly, I could have done this whole project with 3D printing. Like, check out this medieval building, which is already layered that I could easily use as storage, ready to go. Starting off with a bunch of different barrels and crates and a couple of carts for good measure. So I slapped that into print overnight, and while that was running, I went back to my castle and gave the whole thing a bit of a wash in a stain that I formulated to be another sort of neutralizing brick tone. next, I mainly print stone, starting off with a Colosseum, which I know is quite a large piece, but the reason for this is actually because I want something to store my Ryobi tools in. Mainly my hot glue gun, occasionally my drill, but it is notoriously the thing that just seems to disappear in the clutter of my workspace. But since this Colosseum design from MakerWorld already has the lower level with the doors filled in, I just make a cylinder primitive to the height of that first layer and Boolean join these two together, making a heightened platform inside of the Colosseum that my tools can sit in, which will make them easier to reach and easier to see. I've used the same Citadel paint pot holder for many years now, so I can't quite picture working without it, but I thought if I could find a model that could perfectly fit or be fitted to its shape, it could act as a bit of a disguise, helping my paint pot fit into my setting. I found this awesome little ruin, which is obviously for D&D because it has an interior with some steps, but because of my newfound Boolean skills, I could simply flip that upside down and insert a cylinder that is the exact dimensions of my paint pot, resize my ruin base accordingly, and hollow out the inside so it will fit. Since I'm having fun with booleans, I also hollow out a few little cylinders which could in theory hold some small brushes when they're not in the pot. So now I have this really neat ruin that perfectly fits my paint cup, and for good measure has these little holes that I can store my brushes in while I'm working. How fun is that? Even this thing, like off to the side, is like weirdly perfectly shaped to just like randomly put my brushes down so they don't end up in a clutter on the bench. Practicality is not the goal with all of this, and in fact I'm sure just conventional storage would be more practical, but I mean, this is so much more fun. I keep just looking at those houses that I constructed and just loving them, and now I feel it's time to make my own. So with the H2D now switched over to laser cutting mode, I decided to give a crack at designing my own building from the ground up. Now, I have never done this before. Like, I've never designed a laser cuttable building that is precise and constructible and practical with storage. My attempted first approach was actually going to be to do it through CAD, which I had very limited experience with like 6 years ago. But even in just spending a few hours deciding to dive back into it, I'm like, this is going to take way longer than I want. And then I realized how easy it was to just manipulate the SVG files of the downloadable buildings that I got, which of course made me realize I could just draw them. I don't need to learn 3D. As long as they're millimeter accurate, I can do all of this flat. And with that, I set about constructing the first ever house shape that I made from scratch. Now I'm trying to plan ahead here, and instead of having two evenly sized angled walls for where the roof would go on, one of them is basically just like a really thin overhanging bar, which is what the roof is going to be glued to and rest on. So once I got the frame to a size I was happy with, it was then a matter of testing my draw. With my confidence slowly growing, I decided to add an optional second story. So a basement level that will be inset a little bit and have another drawer, which I did simply by cutting out a stencil on the floor, which would insert into the upper parts of the walls of the bottom story. But the reason I did this is actually because I want to make several houses and want it to feel like there's some variety. Now remember that weird crossbeam thing that I had going across the spine of the roof? Well, the point of that weird hollow slot in the middle was to have a roof that could sort of slightly push into it. A little quirk of these laser cut things is that you obviously can't cut on an angle, and so the corners of things usually have these interlocking visuals to make these boxes stick together. But I want to hide as many of those as possible, and the roof is one of those ones that's kind of hard to hide. And this is my attempt to hide it, so that rather than having these interlocking sort of finger joints at the very top of the spine of the roof, with a little bit of glue in the middle there, my roof can just slot in and be taped in place with as few seams as possible. This was also my first time adding some more organic details. I literally just hand drew the tiles and copied and pasted them, snipped off the edges, and it works really well. And as a result, I have a quickly populating little city with drawer houses, both single story and double story. And every bit of this space is dedicated to functional storage. It's a good start, but it's just the foundation. It's really the details, all these external adornments, the walls and beams and windows and features that bring it to life. So I'm gonna do that for my buildings and see what other little flourishes I can come up with along the way. Now this is a finicky process. In the same way that it was a bit of back and forth and trial and error with the foundation, it's the same with this framing, but with a little bit more confusion because I need it to be as symmetrical as possible and easy to discern what goes where. After the back and forthing, making my beams a bit thicker and eventually designing the windows and doors that would go onto them, I was really happy with how it was looking, but it was just feeling a bit flat. Specifically the doors and windows, when compared to these other designs, they're more three-dimensional because the doors and windows are sort of inset. I wanted to avoid mine being as fiddly to construct and have opted for closed shutters so that people don't have to block the inside of cut open windows. So I've recreated that same sort of inset feel, that extra layer of three-dimensionality, by making a few little sort of window hoods or window sills, whichever sort of direction you want to put them, and door frames that can sit around and frame the windows and doors, giving them that extra little bit of framing and pop. So now that all the frames for the top and bottom floors have been tested and fit well, it's time to add those little touches of detail and have a cutting marathon to bring together the polished layers of my medieval house drawers. As perfect as I thought these were, it turns out even in that last leg I'm coming across some little hiccups I need to change, like the fact that I didn't leave any wiggle room on the sides of the drawers, which I also didn't realize would be touching against the outside framing. So while I manually carved those back on mine, I did of course duck across to my file and snip those back so no one else would have the same issue. With that minor tweak aside, and after a huge journey of nips and tucks along the way, I finally feel like I have made the perfect design for what I wanted. I'm so happy with how these are coming together. I have finished my design! How good is it? Oh my god. So we have a top drawer. Might have accidentally glued the bottom story. I did. There you go, and our bottom drawer. I am so happy with this. I am going to share it with you guys. I'm going to put it on my Bamboo Lab account where you can download the SVG files for free and make your own laser cut storage houses. Just be careful when you're gluing the... But now that I have two two-story buildings and two one-story buildings, I have a lot of drawers and no way of knowing what is in what. They do look very similar. And remember back to this building where I have this sort of blank area to fill in. That brings me to my next idea. I want to make signs that I can hang like medieval store signs in front of each of these drawers, not only to add to the detail and the aesthetic, but allow me to actually label them in a way that suits the vibe I've got going. And as we've been doing so far, that is of course a trial and error process, making a few attempts until we have some nice proportions and nice fits. My semi-final design was really cool, except the thick border, which was cut out of a separate 3mm piece, just popped out too far and the whole thing sort of felt way too forward-reaching. So I made the arms holding the sign a bit shorter, and instead of doing a separate piece for the border, I set the border zone to be filled in with a sort of laser etch. This final sign design looks awesome and even has a little bit of natural physics in it, which I love. So to take this project over the finish line, I really want to make it pop. I went ahead and cut a whole bunch of these signs and handed them over to Murray, our resident miniature painting master, to hand paint intricate and beautiful tiny medieval signs that will also indicate what is in the drawers. In the meantime, I'm adding the finishing touches, starting off with the drawer liners cut out of just thin 2mm cork, which will be sized perfectly to fit at the bottom of the drawers and of course be engraved with the crest of my creative kingdom. Turns out this project is way more practical than I actually expected. Because when I go to film creative and crafty videos, often most of these whole tubs are on the table spread out. I have picked out all of the tools I most regularly use and distributed them into my village system, and it's freaking perfect. Oh, here's the glue, here's the tweezers, here's my knives, and it's actually space saving and freaking delightful. There's only one thing I slightly regret, and that is when I did this whole Colosseum, I was only just figuring out the Booleans thing, and if I could go back in time, I would Boolean out a whole bunch of different holes in here, because then it could be a glue stick holder as well as a glue stick holder. I don't know if I'm gonna have to reprint that, but I definitely want it. So at the very least, I'm gonna have to do the temporary solution. All right, admittedly, the execution of this concept is a little less than graceful, but it's a proof of concept, and I think the concept is proven. So I will reprint that, just not in time for this video. But how freaking cool is that? I'm having so much fun, and the best part is the most ambitious 3D print I've ever done is just about to finish. I was born for this. Multicolor printing on the H2D is just insanely straightforward. Now, it does take longer than single color printing, but with the 2 nozzles and the fact that it optimizes and tells you exactly like where to put the filaments to save the most filament and save the most time, it just makes it a breeze. And this whole very complex 8-color print went off without a hitch. To make it even more fun, I get to take off all of the supports and prepare my village market in my town. My creative kingdom really is coming together. There's only one final touch missing. That is being able to actually see what is in what building, which Murray has been working hard on delicately painting beautiful miniature signs so I can clearly see which goods these medieval buildings supply. I think one of my favorite things about this video is I've been able to actually show you and prove that this isn't a stupid, but actually it's a useful and enjoyable project idea that is weirdly practical and in the end incredibly satisfying. Because I have finished all my hobbying, my beautiful creative village returns from chaos to calm. Okay, admittedly, the miniatures and I mean even the market isn't really necessary, but none of this is really necessary, and I couldn't be happier. I love my new workstation, my hobby working area. I feel like this is the beginning of many more projects, but this project itself was so much fun. And of course, only possible thanks to Bamboo Lab, who sponsored this video and literally made this physically and logistically possible. And of course, I want to thank you for watching and sharing this delightfully nerdy project with me. Leave a comment if you like this and if you can think of any other buildings that might have practical uses in my village. Subscribe for more fun with art and creativity. Hit the like button. But otherwise, that's it for now. And until next time, I'll see you later.
I'll see you later too, but just make sure you behave yourself. I'm just gonna do my rounds.
I'm an adult.